All right, let's get straight to it. This is a Code Ninja security advisory. We're tracking an urgent threat, CVE-2025-43520, which has been codenamed DarkSword. This is a critical flaw in the Apple ecosystem, and the key thing you need to know is that it's being actively exploited right now. So listen up.
Let's be crystal clear. This is not a drill. We're not talking about some theoretical bug. We're dealing with an active, in-the-wild campaign that has been operating in the shadows for months. State-sponsored actors are using this, which means it's serious.
Now take a look at this timeline, because this is where it gets really concerning. Exploitation starts way back in November. Apple pushes a patch in December, but the full public disclosure doesn't happen until March. That huge gap, that's the window of silence where attackers had a field day. It's exactly what makes a zero-day so incredibly dangerous. So our objective here is simple: to get you the intel you need to protect your perimeter right now. We're forcing the issue because in a situation like this, users have a right to know how to defend themselves.
Okay, before we dive into the technical details of the exploit itself, we need to initiate protocol. We're establishing a secure communications link. This is critical for ensuring you get real-time intelligence from us moving forward.
First action item, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This isn't just about watching videos. This is a security necessity. It's how you maintain real-time situational awareness.
Next, hit the like button. Consider this your formal acknowledgement that you have received this intelligence briefing. It confirms the signal is getting through.
And finally, report your status in the comments. Just 2 words, patched or vulnerable. This helps us perform a census and gauge the blast radius of this threat across the community. All right, comms check complete. Let's move on. We're now going to dissect this vulnerability. Time to understand the anatomy of the DarkSword exploit.
So what's the trick here? At its core, this exploit uses a classic flaw called a race condition. You might know it as time of check to time of use, or TOCTO. Basically, the system checks if something is safe, but in the tiny fraction of a second between that check and when it actually uses it, the attacker changes the rules of the game.
And here's exactly how it works. It's a brilliant bait and switch happening at the memory level. First, the kernel checks a block of memory and asks, hey, is this safe and all in one piece? The check comes back, yes, all clear, but then, bam, the attacker remaps that memory behind the kernel's back. When the kernel goes to write to that location, it doesn't check a second time. And that's it. That leads to an out-of-bounds write straight into the kernel itself. Game over.
So now you know how it works. The next logical question is, who's in the line of fire? Let's define the blast radius.
The scope here is, well, comprehensive. This isn't just one product. It's the entire Apple ecosystem. We're talking macOS, iOS, iPadOS, all the way to your watch and even visionOS. No corner of your Apple fleet is safe without this patch. And the impact is severe. If a malicious app gets onto your device, it can either just crash the whole system or, much worse, it can write to kernel memory. And that is the keys to the kingdom. It's the foundation for a complete device takeover. Now let's talk severity. You might see a little discrepancy here. CISA has it rated as medium, probably because it requires local access first. But the National Vulnerability Database, NVD, has it at a 7.1 high. And we agree with the high rating. Once an attacker has that initial foothold, the potential for damage to system integrity is catastrophic. Which brings us to the most critical part of this briefing. Let's talk about the urgent mitigation protocol. These are your required actions to neutralize this threat. Here is your checklist. Look at it closely. You have to get every device in your fleet updated to these specific versions or something newer. There is no other way. Patching is the only solution here. So how does the patch actually work? Well, it's a direct fix. Apple's engineers basically made it so the kernel performs that safety check a second time right before the write operation. It validates that the memory is still contiguous, and that simple step closes the window for the attacker completely. You know, this level of disclosure becomes an absolute necessity when a threat is being actively exploited. At that point, keeping things quiet only helps the attackers, and it forces an official response. And that's exactly what happened. The fact that state-sponsored groups were using this is why CISA added it to their known exploded vulnerabilities catalog. For U.S. federal agencies, this isn't a suggestion, it's a mandate. For everyone else, it is the loudest possible alarm bell you're ever going to hear. And here's the deadline, April 3rd, 2026. That is the drop-dead date for federal agencies to get this patched. If you're in the private sector, you should treat this date with the exact same level of urgency. The clock is ticking.
So we end with this question. Right now, your systems are in one of two states. They are either patched or they are vulnerable to a kernel-level takeover by a known weaponized threat. There is absolutely no middle ground. That concludes this advisory. Stay vigilant, stay secure.